And once again, welcome to Soul Collective and Sacramento Activist School initial Netflix watch party and Q&A with filmmaker Rodrigo Reyes.
Hey, thank you guys.
My name is Dominic Porras. I'm from Soul Collective, and I will be hosting and mediating this, moderating the chat tonight. So before we get started, I would like to ask for those of you who would like to just hear the chat, if you could just have your mute on. And then if you would like to ask a question, whenever you feel like asking a question, you could insert it into the chat, just so that we can limit background noises from interfering with the stream. So again, thank you for allowing us, Rodrigo, to host your film. And yeah, I just wanted to say that's a really, really awesome film. I have a lot to discuss, but I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and start.
So let me know if you can hear me good.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So my name is Rodrigo, and I was born in Mexico City, but my both my grandfathers on my mom and dad, they were both migrant workers out here in Merced. So pretty much the same neighborhood of the Central Valley, and so I've always, as I grew up, between Mexico and the U.S., I was always very interested in the stories that I grew up hearing, like the stories of how people came here, what we went through. And, as I started making films, that's what I gravitated towards. So I was invited to make this film for Netflix, and they didn't really have a clear idea. They just said, we want to make films about the relationship between Mexico and the US. And then I heard about this thing that happened out there in Tennessee. And I was like, whoa, like this is the relationship, man. It's like it's a messed up exploitative relationship where people are treated in this way. But instead of just focusing on that, I wanted to see what happened after the raid, after this trauma, because I think that's the work that never gets seen in the media, is the story of how a community just kind of processes, like, man, like I had these values and then I had these values. I didn't realize they were in conflict, or like, what the real human cost was. And it was actually really hard to access this community. They're very reserved, both on the like white side and on the Latino side. Like they didn't trust me, and that was a new experience for me of being seen as an outsider in the U.S. But they didn't trust me because they just felt like, man, like our story is not in our control, And so it took a long time to get those scenes with, where that lady welcomed us to her house, and we saw how, she's well off, and her friendship that developed with this Mexican family, and then the other a woman who shared the story of her husband. That took like 3 visits to get that.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I have a question. Well, I guess you kind of answered it, but I was going to say, what compelled you to go out there and capture the story, and how much time did you go spend out there in Granger County? How much time officially did you end up spending there, from first day to last day of shoot?
I think I went there like 3 times for long periods of time, like weeks at a time. And then the first time was just to meet people, just to talk to people,
Mm-hmm.
just to show them that I was going to do something different. And that's where I met the priest. And the priest was like this, like this middle person. He's kind of like an ally who was there, like kind of, he was in touch with the white community and the Latino community, and everybody kind of trusted him enough to listen a little bit to what he had to say. Um, and he and I worked together really well to kind of tap into the characters and to build trust. Because basically, people on the immigrant side of communities that were directly impacted, they said, "Well, we've already talked to a lot of press. and like this is just, I'm just destroyed by what happened. And then on the other side, on the white community felt that I was just looking for a villain. And like my point of view is not to look for a villain or anything, is just to see what people are actually thinking. Like once you pull off, you know, all the layers of politics, you know, what is it that you actually feel about this problem and this thing that happened in your community? And I think that's how you start to heal and to come together. um, so that's why I took, you know, 3 trips out there to work and work and work and like really kind of prove myself to everyone so they would let me into their space. And I feel that the film really does capture the heart of how they are experiencing this trauma. Um, and everyone has told me they felt that the film was very respectful to their story, which was very important to me.
Yeah, earning trust is that that key to getting access to stories like the one that you present in this film. Um, let's see what else. I have another question here. Um, so I think in the beginning and in the end, there's a quote by saying it is the largest raid in a decade, or the largest workplace raid in a decade. Um, how does the town of, or excuse me, how do the residents of Granger County feel about that, and how are they impacted by that raid?
I think what it did was create like an atmosphere of fear. You know, they're people are living in fear and they're living in tension, and even you know, for a while I would like stop somewhere, for instance, and try to talk to a business owner and get their take on what happened. And if they were conservative, they were like 100% conservative, and they would not talk to me, and they would say, "You're the mainstream media, you're fake news." Um, but you could tell that even they were afraid. So you can imagine how afraid the Latino communities were. You know, if even people who had no actual direct impact were already scared and nervous and ready to argue and stuff. Um, I think what I learned from this story was that we have no real idea as a society of the impact that some of this rhetoric has on people, and the intensity of fear, you know. And I think especially with the story of the woman who lost her husband, like you just see like this heartbreak that cuts through all that rhetoric, man. And it's just like what happened to her was just devastating. And you can try to spin it, but really once you get to be in her home and you see her kid, you realize how deeply human her story really is. And so I think the biggest challenge for me was how to stay true to that without, you know, like really putting my own opinions like front and center of the film, but constantly respecting what they felt was the heart of their story. And so I see a question in the chat about that. How is it truly reflective? For instance, for the woman, the white woman, right? Like she didn't want to be portrayed as a villain, but she was. We talked a lot about how what would resonate with people was the struggle of her faith. Like that struggle and being honest about that struggle, I think was what got her to accept to be in the film, because it wasn't about my opinion on her religion, whether I go to church or not, but it was like recognizing that her struggle was there. It was a spiritual struggle, and it was real, and she didn't want me to disrespect that, you know. Well, but she knew, you know, the issue was like a hot topic. But I think once you start getting to the story, you forget about that stuff and you just start seeing the real people living in their world.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, for any others who have joined in, use the chat bar on the side or on the top or wherever it might be to to ask your questions so that way um, Rodrigo can answer them. Let's see. Oh yes, another question. I'm not sure if you have the answer for this, but during the raid, was it mostly men who were taken into ICE custody? Uh-oh.
It was men and women, but the people who got detained the longest were mostly men. Yeah, so many people were released, and and so at the time when that happened, it was the largest raid in 10 years since like the George W. Bush era. It was the largest one, and then soon after, a bunch of other raids started happening, and then this became a footnote in terms of the size. Um, and I guess that's kind of what the film is playing with. It's like, we see the news and then we see a headline, like, and then it goes away, and then something else takes its place, right? Another and another headline. And so, what happens if we slow down and we look at one of them and see what the whole aftermath is, so that this story is not just another statistic, you know? But that's why the film kind of opens and closes with that, to kind of like bring us in and out of the news cycle a little bit.
There's another question. Maybe you can shed some light on those questions.
Was there anything you want to share regarding this story that you were not able to express or show in the film? I wanted to, at some point, I wanted to invite, like, for a collaboration, like some sort of like a religious like performance where people would go out and like walk like maybe like a mile or two to kind of ask for some sort of healing for the community. And I wanted to set all that up and really, kind of be like this person who's like, hey, I'm going to push you guys out of your comfort zone and provoke this situation that's happening. But I wasn't able to do that because people were so afraid of how I was going to portray them, that it was hard to even sit down and interview with folks. And then someone says, did it end up being the same story as you set out in the beginning? It wasn't the same at all, but it feels the same because I was like, this little town in the middle of like deep red, Appalachia, um, where Latinos are a tiny minority. Like it's like a fable, like a story, like a fairy tale of what's gone wrong with America. That these communities are being traumatized when really the values are so similar. Family is so important for both sides. There's so many things that are important for both sides, and yet we're focusing on this one thing and it's destroying this community. And so I liked how at the end the priest kind of gives this story of like, well, this is kind of like in the Bible, and it's almost like we're in the Bible, and then it just starts to rain and flood, and it's almost like divine intervention or something. But that's the stakes for people when they're living in this situation. Like the stakes are really intense. It's not just like something you read about. It's real, man. Like it's the defining moment, I think, of their lives. And there's another question. Are there any organizations helping the undocumented community? Yeah, so that was my first point of contact, organizations like Tennessee Refugee and Immigrants Rights Coalition and other people. And so I went to some of their meetings, and then I talked and interviewed many people just on audio, just to get their story on tape. And I met so many different families, and many of them were like, man, like this would be perfect to capture your story. But then what ends up happening in film, and especially in this kind of film that is like so kind of like visually beautiful, and it's a slow process, so we're not able to include everyone you meet. And for me, I've had, I've learned my lesson to be very like upfront with people. And so for instance, there was like a family I couldn't end up including, but we stayed in touch, and I explained to them why in a very transparent way, like just be honest with people, and at some point I think she had lost some footage of when they got reunited with one of their family members, and I had it and I gave it to her, and we still check in together, because at the end of the day, like it's about trust, right? And people should trust you even after you've met them, even if they're not in the film. That trust and respect should still be there. And even if, of course, they wanted to be in the film, for instance, I think people understand if you're honest. They understand that you have certain things that you need to deal with. But if you try to not be honest and try to maybe trick the relationship, that's where people start to resent, you know?
No, that's very true. No, trust is the key, like you mentioned at the beginning of the chat. Um, One of the things that I just kind of want to just mention is that in your storytelling, in such a topic that is so it is very heavy. Um, you use a little bit of humor in the story, which is very important for stories like that, so that one doesn't become too entrenched with the the deep matter of the movie. But I really enjoyed the scene where it's like you have the the man and the women, they're talking about their taste in vegetables, and that brings a little humor, and also the baptism scene. It's very very adorable. Um, you know, Growing up Catholic, I remember a lot of my friends, getting baptized very late, and so that brought back some memories. And seeing the trust that they that you can see in them. Yeah, it was just that's very hard to earn, and you did a great job um, showing that. Do you want to share some more experience on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that stuff is really funny. And it's funny because it's true in a way that is like, you can't write it, right? It's like, these are who they
Yeah.
are. And like, I also understand who they are, right? So like, for instance, when Pancho is singing, they're arguing about like how to make the grill food, right? And then he pulls out his guitar and he starts like playing really a corrido about Sonora, right? And it's like this famous song where this guy like is in love with this girl that he sits next to on the bus. But it's really an excuse to tell you about Sonora, about the state, right? But the lady didn't know that. She was just like, she just heard cumbia, and then she was like kumbaya, and then he's like playing the song, and I'm like, man, like I'm not gonna tell her what the song is about because she might not like it, she might not dig it. But it's like all the stuff that happened around that, right? Like talking to Pancho, visiting his house, seeing his videos, like how he sings with he has a band, like talking about music. And also the people that I bring to work with me, like I brought a Mexican cinematographer who also knows what people are really going through. And so he can relate to them, because I think the problem is many of these films are made by people who only read about it in the New York Times, They read about immigration and they're like, oh, I have a clear opinion about this really bad issue. But they've never actually sat down and had like a fajita or whatever with these guys, or like jammed out with their music, or, you know what I'm saying? It's like, so it's kind of my responsibility as this bicultural person to like bring that to the table and to make sure everyone feels the same level of respect. Because to me, like, that man who played a song for us, he's an artist, and he deserves as much respect as the wealthier person who owns that house. um, but that was something that was a challenge for me, like, is to balance and not, the difference between being funny and making fun of is like really thin sometimes. So I try not to go into the making fun on this project. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? I know we have one question from Dia. What are you working on now or next? You want to maybe talk about that?
Yeah, like, so I was, because of this crisis, a lot of things have changed, but I was about to launch a film at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I think they're still going to do like a digital thing, but that movie is a different type of movie where I'm looking at the history of the conquest of Mexico, because next year will be 500 years that Cortez officially conquered the Aztec capital. like on August, I think 13th of 1521, the Aztec emperor surrendered to him, and they officially took over. And so I've always been interested in that history and what that means. So I'm working on this film about my relationship. I mean, you know, not my relationship, but like my ideas of history, in light of this anniversary. And so what happens is, in the movie, there's an actor who plays a conquistador, right? And he arrives in modern Mexico, and he doesn't know that he's in modern Mexico, but soon he realizes, oh man, 500 years have gone by. What am I doing here? And he's walking from the beach where he landed with Cortez. He's walking all the way to Mexico City, and he meets all these real people, like actual people who are living with the aftermath of violence. Like for instance, the first person he meets is the son of a journalist who was murdered, because Mexico has like a huge amount of murdered journalists. And then he meets like people who are looking for human remains. So he sees all the different crises of Mexico, and he meets real people who are, they're not like famous, they're not celebrities, they're just like regular people in their little towns, like fighting for each of these things. So he meets migrants, he meets like a family who suffered a feminicidio. And so like in the process, he's remembering what he did when he helped conquer the Aztec Empire. And so there's this connection being built between the oppression of today and the oppression of yesterday. And so he has to unlearn all the colonialist, mindset that he has. And so I'm very excited about that movie, but now we're all like, kind of changing our strategy to make sure that it survives this crisis. um, and I have a few other projects that I'm working on as well about criminal justice here in the US.
Thank you, thank you. Man, I can't wait to see what that looks like soon. And if we can get a screening in the future, that'd be wonderful. And hopefully, with all this goes over well. Let's see. I
Definitely.
think we have another question. Um, Process. Yeah, can you talk about your process?
Can you talk about process when you first got there? Um, I try to be really honest with people. Like, some filmmakers don't explain their ideas, but I usually show up with a lot of ideas and I explain them and I talk about them to people and I learn. So, like, I that's what I did when I went out to Tennessee. I went to a big gathering where they had like a law day, so people were talking to free lawyers, and in the sidelines, I was there, and at the beginning I introduced myself, and then people came up and talked to me of their own free will, and I explained everything, as much as I could about me and my interest in the project. And, will you be in the film or not? That was the first question people had, like, are you going to film me? When? It's like, well, I don't know. We're still talking. And yeah, I just tried to explain and explain, and then really get to know folks, like we went to a quinceañera, we went to a baptism, and then the party for the baptism, we went to a soccer game, all these things that didn't make it in the movie, but that create this bond so that folks can trust me, they get to know me, and it's not always me in power, it's also me like being hosted by people. And I think when people take you into their home or into their celebration, then you're really you're very privileged to be there and to be received by them. And it's good to kind of not always be the expert. you know I think a lot of times artists or filmmakers, like we're in this position of being the expert because we're the ones who are supposed to know all this stuff. Or But really, I always try to keep that in mind and give people that power back. So if you invite me to your quinceañera, like I'm gonna talk to my crew and we're all gonna go. Like we're gonna go and we're gonna go hang out and experience your life, so that that I'm not just there to extract something from you. Like I actually want to get to know you, work together. and see who you are and what you think about stuff. And who knows, maybe I'll have a really good idea just going out there and meeting your people, you know, like.
Thank you. Just a reminder, this chat it's only 40 minutes in length. So I think we have about 9.5 minutes left. So we'll try and squeeze everything into these next 9 minutes. But I think there's another question that just popped up. What
Yeah,
do you
what do you
think?
think changed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think what changed is that a lot of people realized that the what they were seeing on their TV playing out every night wasn't real life. That like there are real people that they are in touch with who are affected by this. I don't know how big that realization was. Um, Obviously, our situation in this country in immigration is like totally appalling and gross, and all this stuff keeps happening. But I think it is really important to make that room for that conversation where people can change their minds, where people can meet other people, even if it's one or two, like in the film, right? Like it's a lot more important than just, you know, dismissing everyone outright, because these folks will continue to coexist, right? So I think the film really underscores that need, you know. But I know that the community is still struggling, and that they're still fighting to get people out of, you know, like the grip of ICE.
Thank you. Let's see. Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to add? Now is the time. Um, and just real quick, when I was doing some research on your work, I noticed on the IMDb page that it mentions that the film was part of a Barack Obama production company. Um, do you have anything that you can share about that?
No, I didn't actually get to interact. And the I think that link might happen through the company that commissioned it, but it's like, you know, honestly, it was more of that like, you know, here's your assignment, that's what you do, and then everything else around it doesn't really I don't have any. It's like yeah, you know what I'm saying? I don't really have that power to be up in a meeting or something like that. But I was just assigned to make this project, and it was actually a struggle because it had so many characters and it was so complex. So that's what I was focusing on, and then upon the release and everything else, you know, like I didn't really get to have that much say in that part.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that just sounds interesting to be um, I guess a part of that. Does let's see, I had another question. Oh yeah, do you have any updates on any of the characters that maybe you can share with us?
Well, I have I stay in touch with the priest, who's like my main point of contact, and then with like the woman, for instance, like the girl whose husband was taken, like I do have some, you know, I know where her family's at, but it's hard to share that because it's sensitive for them in terms of their own safety. I know that you know, the white lady in the film is you know, still active in the church and still feels really strongly that the community needs to do right by the Latino immigrant community. And then I also know that the other character of the man with his kids, he got like an indefinite stay, you know, like one of these suspensions where they just suspend the process for a long time. One of his kids has asthma, so she needs him around all the time, you know, and he pays for her insurance and all this stuff. So that helped him advocate to the courts so that he could stay, and that didn't make it into the film, but the kids themselves did, you know.
Well, we are 5 minutes till the end of this chat. If there are any other questions, now would be a good time to address them. But if we don't have any, then I guess we could just probably end this chat pretty soon.
Did you guys feel like it resonated with your own experiences out here in California? Obviously, we're a lot more Latino over here, but did you guys feel that that it's something that could just happen like anywhere, up in Yuba City or like around you guys?
Yes, well, Sacramento is considered a sanctuary city, and but for the surrounding towns and so forth, they do have to deal with ICE, um, because they have that jurisdiction out there that they can go around and do that, do what they're actually yeah, it's pretty messed up. They can go around, and no, the Bay Area has been dealing with some of that as well. Um, yeah, it's very problematic when they set up raids. And there's some areas of Sacramento where they do set up and have some checkpoints, and sometimes you'll get a notice through a friend on Facebook saying, "Hey, there's a checkbook or a checkpoint on this road, so be careful." So we actually have quite a few uh, watch groups out here that will let people know via social media, but that's I'm not sure if everybody has access to that, so people do fall into those traps sometimes.
I see a comment that says the barbecue scene reminded me of relationships my parents had with neighbors. Yeah, it's like this cultural ignorance on both sides, right? It's like I don't know. Like, see, when I watch that scene, I'm like, there's a possibility here. Like, she's actually trying hard, and he's trying hard. There's a possibility of something new happening here between like this lady and this dude, right, at the barbecue. Like some new way of being a neighbor is possible. You know, I don't know. I don't know what that is. I don't know how you get to that without a lot of time and like good faith and stuff. But yeah, that's also part of the humor, right? Of like people not really understanding each other, but I tried really hard to have a barbecue.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's what it's like for a lot of folks in Sacramento. Yeah, we do have quite a diverse population here, so everybody tries to get along with each other for the most part. But we're at 2 minutes here, or less than a minute now. Sorry. So it's gonna probably just shut down. So we'll just go ahead and any last closing comments? Now's the time. If not, it might just close out. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope to see you guys in person really soon, and I hope you guys all stay really safe.
You too.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Soul Collective.
All right, Rodrigo, take care. Have a good one. Thank you for your time.
Bye bye.